It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Episode number 41, Beneath the Helmet. I have a great new announcement. We have a brand new website, beneaththehelmet.ca. Same link, just a brand new site. It's much more user-friendly, nice and clean, and it has loads of great features for you as a listener or the watcher of Beneath the Helmet. So be sure to check that out. And also while you're there, join our Facebook group, Beneath the Helmet Community, where there's like-minded individuals like yourself who want to share stories or learn from others that are going through the same process and the same path in life. So today I get to sit down in episode number 41 with a former law enforcement officer, former intelligence officer, former military drone operator who is now turned to a Buddhist, as well as a volunteer firefighter. So today I get to sit down with Myke Cole, who's also a very successful author with several books. The links will be down below to check those out. But today we're going to really dive into how psychedelics have helped him survive and thrive through his PTSD journey. So that will be one component. Then we're also going to dig a little deeper into his path of Buddhism and how that has transformed his life and has helped him to be a better person. And then finally, we're going to dig into his life as a volunteer firefighter and how that has really changed his life, a new and better and healthier way to serve his community, and one that doesn't cause any harm. So I hope you enjoy this episode where Myke kind of shares his vulnerable story about all the trauma he's experienced and how he's kind of redirecting his life for a healthier, more loving future. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Until next time, stay well. All right, welcome back, everyone. I have a very distinguished person with me today who we're going to chat with. New friend of mine down in the U.S., distinguished career in the military, law enforcement, intelligence, and now he's a firefighter serving the community. So I want to welcome Myke Cole to the show. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So Myke, tell our listeners a little bit about who Myke Cole is and a little bit about your history and kind of what brought you to where you are today in the fire service, especially after your very distinguished career through several other agencies. So tell us how you got here.
Yeah, thanks. So I don't know how it is in Canada. In the American Fire Service, there's sort of what we call a cursus honorum, like a regular career ladder. I think a lot of us start out in the military or intelligence services, wind up doing work in law enforcement, and then wind up when we get out becoming volunteer firefighters. Again, I don't know what the breakdown is in Canada. In the United States, it's over 70% of fire services in this country are provided by volunteers. If you live outside a major rich city, you're probably being served by people like me, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. But I, look, my journey is that I kind of made my name in writing science fiction and fantasy, and then later history. I went on to be on a number of television shows. I started out Hunted on CBS in 2017, Contact on Discovery 2019. I just shot a spot for History Channel, and that. And look, I'll be very frank, that very transactional and naked pursuit of fame. And there are certainly artists out there that do their work because they love their art. And I certainly love my art. But, we're here to talk about mental health. And so it's important that I be straight. I did a lot of what I did because if enough people scream my name, then I might feel worthy. I might feel, worthy of being loved. And that is a real recipe for disaster. And one of the wonderful things about fire service, people thank me. And I know that to your listeners who are in the service, and I know that you've experienced it, people always telling you, oh, thank you so much. And what I always want to say to them is, no, thank you. Thank you for letting me do it. Because what it's done is it's reconnected me to what it means to be in service to something that matters more than your own ego. We say these silly things like, well, it's something bigger than myself, but what do we mean by that? Right. And what I mean by that is this hungry ego that I tried to feed by getting famous and publishing books and being on TV. And now I get to go into the IDLH, right? I get to go to those MVAs and I get to put on a mask, which makes me disappear so that I can show up for other people who I don't even know. And that is the most profoundly spiritual and rewarding experience of my life. And the thing that, I'm 50 years old, man. It's the thing that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the foundation of this podcast is the mind, body, and spirit. And it's not very common that I actually have good conversations with people about spirituality and the spirit of being a firefighter, right? So I think today's conversation is going to be really powerful and something a little bit unique. But I hope everyone gets a little nugget out of your wisdom and maybe your story as well of, going from that fame mentality to more of a servant mentality, right?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'll do my best. I hardly consider myself very wise, and I'm both new on my spiritual path and I'm new being a firefighter. But again, I'll do my best to tell the truth, and I hope it's helpful to people.
Aren't we all new to this game?
Yeah.
This game of life. So I'd be curious to know what you found so much more impactful in your own personal life in the fire service than in intelligence, in the military, in the law enforcement. What stuck out for you there?
Sure. So, look, I think I think we were connected because I was on the American Institute of Stress's PTSD podcast. I was diagnosed with PTSD after service in Iraq, and I've had various success in treating it until I really had a breakthrough. I think roughly 3 years ago that was very transformative to me. And what PTSD was rooted in was my capacity for violence. So this is the thing is that, when we talk about PTSD from violent interaction, either in law enforcement or in the military, we always think about like what happened to you, right? You got blown up, you saw something terrible. That's always what's really prompted. And I really think that maybe is the wrong angle, because the really horrible thing that causes trauma is what you are capable of, what you did, and what you now have to live with. And I want to be clear, I wasn't a door kicker, man. Like I was, putting drones on people and putting direct action teams on people. I was targeting officers. So, but I was still the integral link in that chain of killing where I said, send it. I nominated that target. I effectively pulled that trigger, and carrying that violence and also understanding that I like that violence. That feels good, man. Like it feels good to be righteous and to be correct and to, bring about judgment. I'm saving people. I know what's right and wrong. And you don't realize until after all of that, like, my God, what the hell was I thinking? And in the fire service, all of that violence is there, man. We force doors, we take windows, we cut roofs, we crawl around in the smoke to make the crab. We do all of that. And all of that same impulse of aggression is there, but it doesn't hurt it. It just helps them. And it's such a tremendous gift to have a place to put this stuff that doesn't do damage. And I'm so grateful that I found it. I wish I'd found it when I was 16, like most volunteers out here have.
Beautiful. I love how you kind of came to that realization that it is still violence, but it's violence in a good way. It's aggression in a good way. It's allowing us to vent and to use that frustration that's built up in us in a positive way, such as forcing doors, popping windows, all that kind of stuff without hurting anyone. I think that's a beautiful kind of transition in your life, right?
Yeah, but it's even more than that, right? Like so much of both this and my spiritual path, and I guess we'll get to that as Buddhist, is holding tenderly all of these things I can't stand about myself. I mean, my greed and my desire to be famous and my want of money and my judgment, and it makes me sick. Why do I do that? And that kind of stuff, which is everyone would say, oh, that's normal, but we hate it. We push it down, right? And one of the big things God, I feel like so embarrassing. I feel like I'm a Hallmark cards. Well, my journey, I always tease people who talk about their journey, is making peace with that and accepting that as the flip side of everything I love about myself. My capacity for loyalty, my capacity to risk my own life, all of these things that I think are wonderful. They are not only the flip side, but the same thing as all of those things I hate. And it's not a coincidence to me. If you go on my social media, and I try to use social media very infrequently because it is poison. But I just got a tattoo and it's crossed irons behind the Florian cross with the lotus of Buddhism in the center of it. And because for me, those two experiences are profoundly linked. They're almost the same thing.
It's funny that you brought up the tracking TV show Hunted. Is that right?
That's right.
I've watched that and I've seen you on that TV show, and I had no, until the last week, I didn't put two and two together that was you. So
I don't recognize that guy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Arjuna, I don't really like that guy.
Mhm.
And I guess part of the whole thing for me is eventually I got to get to a point where I can forgive that guy and sort of like, that's where you were at the time, who you were at the time.
So I'd love to hear what Myke loves about himself right now.
Well, how do I say this? Okay. To me, it is a little bit dramatic. And I'll try to keep bringing it back to the fire service because I think that's something we share. I remember, look, man, I joined up at 47, Arjuna. I mean, think about that. Like most of the people that I was coming in with, they're kids. I'm in firefighter 1, interior firefighting. I'm the oldest person by 30 years. It's insane. And you know what we do going through that smoke maze and the tangling you up in wires and doing the CPAT and the breathe down and running a high rise pack up the stairs and doing dummy drags. And, they're trying to get you to wash out. I don't know how it is in Canada. That's the way it is here. And the first thing you think is, in spite of what I've been through in the military police, is that, what am I doing? I can't do this. These are kids, I can't. And somewhere in there was this vision, I could see myself with that black shield on. I'm sorry, in my department, when you're doing exterior ops, you got an orange shield and we swap it out with a black one. When you finish and you come off probation. And I just had this vision of myself as an certified interior attack fireman. I could see it. And that vision, even though I was scared and full of anxiety and I don't know if I can do this, I knew I because that vision from inside myself was there. And now I have that vision of myself as a decent human being. I just got engaged, man. I don't know if you're married or not. But think about what you're taking on doing, right? And I've had a failed marriage before and all these relationships that didn't work. And you start to think, I can't do this. I'm not good enough to do this. I mean, what's required of really showing up in a relationship, really giving yourself everything you own, everything you are. And that includes all the awful things about yourself that that you're going to, mistreat this person without meaning to. And you really reach a point in your life where you think, I can't do this. I'm the guy who went to Iraq and blew people up. I'm such a, and what's happened because of me getting on the path, there's really 3 things that have gotten me here. One is psychedelics, which I assume we'll talk about. The second, and the biggest one, is Buddhism. And the third is the fire service. And now I see that same vision of myself as I did when I was in academy. That guy, the good guy, the guy I want to be. And it allows me, but not like the guy I want to be. That's me. And one of the things that we talk about in Buddhism all the time is, in Buddhism, we talk about enlightenment, right? Enlightenment for us is this thing you get to, right? Or at least people from the outside see it, where you achieve peace, nirvana, as we talk about, moksha, liberation. But one of the things I've come to realize, and that a lot of the masters say, is that this thing that you think is faith, that you think is belief, it's not, Arjuna. It's recognition. It's accepting that this is who you already are if you can just get out of your own fucking way. And,
It's always the case, isn't it?
and I can't tell you how good that is. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of work to do, like it's going to be hard, but the bone deep, the soul deep belief that I can do it, that I can be a decent person, that is something I have never felt in my life.
Wow, that's powerful. Wow. Well, Mike, you kind of just touched on that. I'd love to explore, and I'm not going to say journey because it's not a journey. Want to want to travel down your path of those three kind of pillars that you mentioned. So psychedelics, um, your own Buddhist kind of beliefs, and the fire service.
Yep.
So let's kick it off with psychedelics, and I think that's I know in the fire service that's definitely something that's becoming more and more of a buzz to work with people who have traumatic stress injuries, and I'd love to hear your experience with them, the goods and the bads,
Sure.
and how you find them to be so useful in your path to recovery.
Sure. So I want to be clear starting out, and that is this: psychedelics are illegal. And I would never endorse people break the law or risk the consequences of the law. I'm speaking only for myself and what they've done for myself. You do what you do at your own risk. Also, we are in the middle of a psychedelic renaissance where every tech bro and Instagram dork is telling you how great they are. And they are great, but they are not without risk. And this is not marijuana. This is not booze. And you can have a bad experience. I really think that they are overwhelmingly positive. And I would say that in the many years I've been using these substances, I've had two bad experiences, and both of them, while challenging, ultimately were very instructive. But brains are different and people are different. And there are certainly cases where people really harm themselves. So I'm a big proponent. That is the only negative thing I'm going to say, but it's got to be said because people are often like, what do you mean? And they go running off and do these things. And it's a risk. So I just want to say that. So for me, I had reached a point of suicide. And when I say a point of suicide, so I think you really know you're done when it's exhaustion. I was angry for a while and thought, well, I'll just kill myself and show it. Then they'll all feel so, and I never really, that was not the moment. It was when I reached the point, I am so tired. I just can't do this anymore. I don't give a fuck. I'm not even going to write it. I don't care what people think about why I'm doing this. I just want it over. That was when I was really in danger. And I was probably, look, I don't know how it is in Canada. In America, everybody, the dog has a gun. So I'm guessing I was a few hours out. And a friend of mine said, hey, look, you're done, dude. Why don't you just try psychedelics? There's a real advantage here. And I could do something for you. And look, I've been a cop half my life. I was like, dude, that's illegal. And it's like, you're going to die. What do you care? So through a network, I got connected to and this is another thing, by the way, when you are using psychedelics and you are not experienced, I would suggest strongly that you do so under the supervision of a guide. There are professionals who do this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of charlatans too, a lot of bullshit shamans out there. You got to watch it. And I can't tell you how to get connected to these people without getting in trouble. So I would say there's an organization called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science. They are international. I believe, and if you contact them, they may be able to find a legal way to guide you to the help. But please seek supervision. I had a licensed psychotherapist, PhD, who did this on the side because they were sick of their licensed psychotherapy not working. And psychedelics are incredibly effective for these things. And this person did psychotherapy with me for about 4 months. And at the end of each weekly session, I would say, are you going to give me the drugs? And they would say, no, you are not ready. That's how you know I was with someone good. And then after that, I finally gave the correct answer. They felt comfortable and we went and did it. And I was dosed with 2 drugs. One is MDMA, also known as Molly or ecstasy, which is a party and recreational drug, which is often used. And then after that, psilocybin, which is the active component in mushrooms. It is a mushroom. And what MDMA does is it dampens the function of the amygdala, the default mode network of the brain, which is where fight or flight lives. And in super doses, look, And I was not warned of any of the side effects, which really I'm bugged about. And my doctor said, look, I didn't want to prejudice you. I know I can keep you safe, but I will say this to your listeners. Males, especially older males, may have urine retention as a result of MDMA use. It's not frequent, but it can happen. And when it happens, it's dangerous. So be aware of that. And also MDMA can make you very romantically and sexually active. And that's really uncomfortable. It's not like alcohol or marijuana where you're not in full control of yourself. You can make the decision. You don't want to make good decisions. And that's something that I was not warned about. And I want to warn people. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it's important. So if you're a young woman and you're going to use MDMA therapeutically, maybe make sure your guide is another woman who is not romantically inclined toward you so you can remain safe. That's really important. So, but what the MDMA does is it dampens the fight or flight mechanism in the brain and the screaming stops. And you can pay attention. You can talk about what's going on in your life and not run away from it.
Not have the fire alarm go off in your head.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we started with that. And then what the psilocybin does is it activates the prefrontal cortex of the brain and it maps new neural pathways. The way I talk about it is that depression, really serious depression, is actual physical ruts in the brain where rumination is occurring, where you're circling the same thought. And psilocybin throws snow up, covers those ruts over, and you make new ones. And those are physical phenomena. Your brain changes permanently. You grow new dendritic spines. So I'll never forget this. And I love telling the story because I mark it as my second birthday. My guide and I were standing at beside a muddy pond. We did it in nature. A lot of guides will blindfold you and ask you to go inward. I was wise, eyes open in nature, and I always do it that way. I love it. And we were standing next to this murky pond, and there were frogs and tadpoles in it. You know, I could tell. And the drugs are doing their thing, and we're having a therapy session. We're talking. You know, we're talking about what's bothering me and all of this stuff that I'm trying to sort out. And suddenly I turn to her and I go, "Holy shit!" I go, "How many frogs and tadpoles do you see in this pond?" And she goes, 10. There were thousands. And I wasn't hallucinating, Arjuna. MDMA interdicts the hallucinogenic property of psilocybin, especially for first-time users. My eyes were so dilated that the beams of light, I could follow them all the way to the bottom of that pond. And because the psilocybin had opened my brain and got me thinking from a different perspective, I realized, holy shit, I don't see the world the way the world is. There are all these things I don't see. I'm wrong about these things. I thought there were 10 frogs. There's 1,000. What else am I wrong about? Am I wrong that I'm a bastard? Am I wrong that life isn't worth living? Am I wrong? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It was a tectonic shift, this idea of perspective that the world remains the same. My problems didn't go away. I'm still the person I am. I still have to deal with the things. All I did was look at it from a different angle. The only way I can describe it is that you live in the same house 40 years. And to the right of your front door is an umbrella stand. And you have been walking past that umbrella stand 40 years. So many times you could describe it from memory. You could draw a picture. But you never got down on your knees and really looked at it. And you didn't know what it really looked like. That's what happened. And it changed everything. And I came out of that a completely different person. Now, for some people, psychedelics are flipping a switch. The cure. I was good for about 6 months. And then I had more work to do. And I still use them therapeutically. And now I also sit for people. Now there's a difference. Guides guide you. They help you integrate. They help you interpret what you're experiencing. Instead, what a sitter does. I just do what's called harm reduction. So no, we're not going to make any phone calls right now. Nope, you're going to keep your shirt on. You know, that kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I have seen these substances transform and save lives as they did mine. And I am so, I'll be honest, angry and frustrated with the obstacles that we are putting in the way of first medical legalization, but also recreational legalization. I hear all these people who don't have serious mental health impacts going, well, we have to be very careful here. And I'm like, no, you have to be very careful here. We're dying. We need this stuff. So and what bugs me is I have to use all these caveats and I have to be so careful because you go to jail for this stuff, even now. But I do have hope that within 3 to 5 years, this will really be a reality for everyone.
Yeah, I truly believe that as well. Yeah, what an amazing transformation in. So how many sessions would you say was your second birthday? Like
My
was this-
my second birthday was one session. We
Oh,
were out in
wow.
the woods we were out in the woods for a few hours, and I'm not exaggerating, Mark, for 6 months.
Wow.
I started to, I don't want to say backslide, but hit up against similar walls after that. But now I had a whole toolkit.
Hmm.
Now I could see it and be like, there's a movie called The Cell, with Jennifer Lopez, and they go into the brain of a serial killer. It's a science fiction film. And the serial killer captures one of the men but this is in his own brain. This isn't physically happening. And the serial killer begins to torture him. And in the dream of this serial killer's brain, the protagonist keeps saying, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. And that was what I was able to do as I went back into depression. Was like, okay, I know my brain is lying here. And then I began to pivot. All right, do I do more psychedelics? And that's what took me to the Dharma, to Buddhism, because I started reading and listening, and I discovered this is the thing all my life. I had been this transactional, fame-seeking asshole and was just dismissed and shit all over anybody who had any kind of spiritual belief or faith. You people, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You could be making money. You could be making art. You could be networking or whatever. And instead, you're sitting in this fancy building talking about a man in the sky who says terrible things about gay people. What the hell's wrong with you? And I completely missed what they were actually doing. And when I finally found Alan Watts he's got this wonderful English accent. He's this 60s hippie who drank himself to death, amazingly enough, but he describes what Buddhism is and what Hinduism is and what Eastern faiths are. And that took me to the Thich Nhat Hanh, who's this famous Vietnamese monk, at his talks, and also to Ram Dass, who's a famous hippie psychedelics advocate who just passed away recently. And that then brought me into Soto Zen Buddhism, which is where I am now, which is the Japanese tradition that's here in the United States. And we call it the way. And Arjuna, it's the way. It is for me.
So I love how you kind of just morphed into that second pillar of your life. I'd love to hear more about how you kind of got introduced to that and how it's changed your life, this practice of Buddhism and Eastern religion cultures.
Yeah, I mean, Alan Watts says about psychedelics, and he was a user and an advocate, that when you get the message, hang up the phone. And Shunryu Suzuki, who's a really famous Soto Zen master, he's passed away, unfortunately, he's big in San Francisco, one of the guys who made it happen in this country, said that, these drugs, they can only point the way, but the way is in practice, it's in training. And this is the thing, is that, and I'm studying now to be a chaplain, and I have such passionate love for the Abrahamic faiths, for Islam, for Christianity. For my historical work, I translated the Bible from Greek. It's how I taught myself. I love these glorious faiths, in spite of the things that bug us about them. The oppression of women and the use to justify war, that you don't throw the baby out in the bathwater, that doesn't obviate all the amazing things that Jesus said. But the Abrahamic faiths rest on belief. And Buddhism is not something you believe, it is something you do. It is a gym. It is a gym for your mind. And Arjuna, people like us, firefighters, military, we know how to do that. We know how to show up and get with the program and follow the orders and lift the weight. And that's what Buddhism is. at least with Soto Zen but I think the whole discipline. And the thing is, look, I'm a contrarian intellectual. I poke holes in everything. I want to find the fault, and I have tried to find the fault, problem, the gap in this view of looking at the world, and I can't. And the thing is, people call it a religion because it occurs in temples looking at gold statues, but it's not. It's not. There's no God. So, seated meditation in Buddhism, which is what we focus on in Soto Zen, other kinds of Buddhists do it differently. It's simply this. I sit on a cushion. Actually, I kneel on a cushion. I keep my posture straight and I focus on my breath in and out. And that's it. And then you start thinking, well, did I pay the bill? Oh, that person was attractive. Oh, this guy cut me off. Nope. We're gentle. We don't judge. Okay. You're thinking now. Let that go and come back to your breath. There's the training. And you do this again and again and again. And this teaches you two really important things. The first is that attention, as Alan Watts says, is a spotlight, not a floodlight. And you get to decide what you put it on. And right now you're training to put it on your breath. But off that cushion, you can put it on anything you want. Do you want to ruminate on what you did in Iraq? Or do you want to put it on the 10,000 Flowers in Spring? That's a great poem, which I'll tell you. Do you want to put it on your wife who you love? Do you want to put it on the good you're doing in the world? Because you get to decide where you put it, and you're training to decide where you put it. But the second thing it does is it brings you into the present moment. Because what human beings we do is we live in the past, memory, and we live in the future, anxiety. And neither of those things are controllable. The past is done. You can't fix it. And the future, we don't know what's going on. Spending time in those places does no good. And we miss where we are. We miss what we're doing. We miss our own lives. Arjuna, I starred on 3 television shows, published book, edited Stephen King's novel. He thanks me in the acknowledgments. I was in Greece. And we pulled one of his books off the shelf and my name's in there. You know, I've been all over the world and I missed it. And now, I think I still miss it sometimes, but I have these moments where, like, you know, you're in a pump out or you're in a fire, you're in an MVA and you want to die. It's August, the vapor barrier's making you sweat or whatever. Your eyes are burning or I don't know, your Bible alert went off because you can't control your breathing and your partner's mad at you because you just pulled him out of the fire and he could have kept operating. And you just think, what a privilege. How friggin' cool is this? Because you're there, man. You're actually in your own life and you don't realize how often you're not. And that's what Buddhism is. It's a gym to train you to do. It's not believing in magic. It's not fancy saint. I mean, there's all of that's in it. There's saints, there's crazy magical stories, there's cosmology, all there. But you can see that is a layer that people and cultures have put over it. And the core concept of it, those 3 marks of existence, the 4 noble truths, I haven't described it, people can Google them. All of that is inarguable. And when you work it, and that's the other thing that's so wonderful is I don't have to get on my knees and pray to someone else to solve this for me.
That's good.
I'm being taught to solve it for myself.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. That's huge right there. I can see just looking at you how much of an impact this has made on your life.
It's terrifying too, because you all forgot to hold who you are and what you did. Like that karma, it's not a joke, man. What you do and what happens to you is the same thing. So when people are pissed off at you, you have a reputation problem or you're in prison or, whatever it is, you can't be the victim, man. What did you do? What did you do? And even to things where you feel completely blameless, Buddhism is utterly unsentimental. There are causes and conditions. We call it Indra's and Nek, or it's just this galaxy of jewels where every one reflects every other. But if you look into it and you pay attention, and you want to ask yourself, my God, why did this happen to me? You can answer. You really can. So it's wonderful. It's transcendent. I feel transformed by it. My ability to be this man, this good man that I just described to you is dependent on it. but it's scary and it's a lot of work. So just like the psychedelics, man, don't think you're showing up for sunshine and roses. You're showing up to the gym.
Wow. So how does somebody learn the ins and outs of Buddhism? Is it like going to church, becoming a Catholic, becoming a Christian? It's pretty easy to find that guide. How do you find your guide for Buddhism?
So Buddhism is unlike the Abrahamic faiths in that it does not proselytize at all. In fact, it's full of stories of people coming to monasteries and wanting to be trained. We call it training, right? That's very different. It's training.
Mm.
And the master says, I have nothing to teach you. And there are stories of supplicants sitting in meditation outside the gates of a monastery in the snow for days. There's one story of a guy who cut his arm and gave it to a master. Please pacify my mind. And God, what a wonderful story. This master Bodhidharma, who he did this to, said, show me your mind. And the guy says, I look for it and I cannot find it. Bodhidharma leads into him and goes, there, I have pacified it. I love that story. But the point is, you got to want to get in, right? This is not Sunday potluck, church supper where everyone's trying to bring you in. Obviously these are, I'm telling you ancient stories. People are a lot friendlier now, but look at small group in the United States. It's a monastic tradition. So mostly these centers around monasteries, you're going to be learning from monks. But when you go in there, at least in Soto Zen, there's a formal system of training where you petition a teacher to teach you, and then you train. It's a lot like martial arts, right? You seek a master and the master trains you, and they train you in sitting meditation, and they train you in walking meditation, and they train you in what we call koans, which are these unanswerable questions that they ask you, and they make you come in and give them answers, and they go, no, keep trying, and send you back out. It's very much like the Karate Kid. But how I got introduced to it is I started the same way most people do. You start listening to podcasts and reading. Eventually it leads you to the monastery near you, but you get books, listen to podcasts. The best ones I could recommend, I would recommend that you listen to 3. The first is Secular Buddhism, hosted by Noah Rasheta, who is, that's good because it's totally and deliberately secular. Another good one is Zen Mountain Monastery. That's the monastery I like to do in Catskills here in New York. And they're just, Shugen Roshi, who's the main speaker there, he's superlative. He's incredible. And the other is the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care, where I'm studying for chaplaincy. Koshin Sensei and other guest speakers often speak on that podcast. And you will get a very good idea of what they're talking about listening to that.
Thanks for sharing those. So you talked about being a chaplain. Is this for the fire service you're thinking, or just a chaplain?
Yeah. So that's the goal. So, and here's my thinking on that is that, listen, I don't want to alienate anyone or get into anybody's politics. I'm actually on the left politically, although I am really horrified by the extremes of both sides, especially my own. American Buddhism, in my estimation, this is just my opinion, is extremely progressive. One might call it woke. And at least among American converts, I think among, Asian born folks, it may be different, and for good or for ill, that alienates most of the American fire service, most law enforcement officers, most military members. And it means the Dharma isn't accessible to them. And it saved me. And these people saved me, right? I mean, that's who's going to drag my ass out of the fire, is a Trump voter. And this thing that is the greatest thing in the world, if that person goes into most of the places I go, the first thing they're going to see is a white-bodied awareness class where we can contemplate the original sin of white supremacy. Now, what do you think that firefighter is going to do when they see that? They're going to turn around and they're going to walk out. And someone who looks like them and sounds like them and knows what they're going through has to be available with the Dharma to talk about. And look, Buddhists are not proselytizers. I don't tell anybody about being a Buddhist. But hopefully, if this path transforms me the way I hope it will and think it will and see it is, that they'll ask. or when they're going through some shit and they're leaning on me and they can say, what do you do? What's helped you? I can tell them the truth. And maybe they'll be able to listen.
So as a chaplain, you would be kind of multi-faith. You would support anyone who's multi-faith, right? Is that right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about the training I'm getting is that very thing. And I'm an ancient and a medieval historian, which has had the unintended side effect of making me a real expert in Christianity. I've read Boethius and Anselm. I've read Thomas Aquinas. I've read Augustine of Hippo, like Little Flowers of St. Francis. Certainly I wouldn't call myself an expert on modern evangelical Christianity, but I know the Catholic faith very well. And for example, this last book I did, The Killing Ground, a biography of Thermopylae. It's about all the battles of Thermopylae, not just the one in 300. We had to cover all these Byzantine battles and the Byzantine Empire. You do not learn about the Byzantines without learning about the Greek Orthodox Church. So, and I was an intelligence officer in Iraq. And how do you work against Al Qaeda? Learn Islam. You really learn it. You learn the Quran, you learn the Hadith and the Sunnah. You learn what folks believe. And and now that I have deep and abiding respect and love for these traditions, and Buddhism, Alan Watts jokes, is Hinduism with the serial numbers filed off. It's very close to what Hindus believe, especially Advaita Vedanta tradition. I am really excited to do that interfaith stuff. And for my clinical hours right now, I'm in a hospice, which is amazing.
Nice.
Amazing. The most transformative experience. And I'm often called on that in interfaith capacity. If someone wants to talk about God or they want to pray, I actually, my patients, we're supposed to call them care partners, but the hospital calls them patients. So I call them patients. She said, what do you believe? And I was like, well, I'm a Buddhist. And she goes, are you kidding me? That's what she said.
It doesn't surprise me. It's
94. She's 94.
Yeah.
Who's a Buddhist?
Yep, exactly. So how did all your learning, your training that you mentioned, how did that kind of correlate and mesh into the fire service? How do you see the fire service being a real good link and kind of partner for your training in Buddhism?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so glad you asked this. My problem, Arjuna, is my ego. It's this hungry ego. It's this bone deep belief I'm a bad person. And the only way I can feel like a good person is if I am famous enough, and if enough women love me and enough men want to be me, and I have so much money and every famous, I'm the world's greatest writer, and then all of my ego will finally say, enough. We have enough. Oh, I know.
Will it?
I know.
Will it? Your ego might saying it wants more.
I'll tell you a great story about this. An ancient story from ancient history, which I love so much because it makes this point. So, in the 3rd century BC, there's this great warlord, Pyrrhus of Epirus. He lived in what is today the Balkans. And at this time, southern Greece was Greek. Southern Italy was Greek. It's not Rome. And the Romans were expanding. They were taking it over. So these Greeks in Italy, they sent across to this dude, this warlord, famous warlord, and said, hey, can you come over and beat the Romans? Be our king, and please help us out. We don't want to be Roman. And Pyrrhus is having a conversation, this great king. He's already rich. He's already powerful. He's having a conversation with Cineas, who's this Greek advisor to the son. Cineas is this old guy. Pyrrhus is this macho badass, And Cineas is trying to, get to the bottom of what he wants here. And Pyrrhus says, all right, we're going to go over, we're going to save these Greeks. And Cineas goes, all right, so you go over there and beat the Romans. What are you going to do? He goes, well, if you save the Greeks, we'll take over all of Italy. And Cineas goes, that's great. Okay, so we got all of Italy. Now what? And Pyrrhus goes, well, we'll cross the ocean and we'll take over Carthage in North Africa. It's the richest trading land in the world. And Cineas goes, okay, great. You got that. Now what? And Pyrrhus goes, well, then we could go to Iberia, Spain. And you get the idea. It goes on and on. And finally,
never satisfied.
Right. And finally, Cineas exhausts him and he's taken over. It gets to the point. It's like, Pyrrhus, we have now conquered the whole known world. What now? And Pyrrhus goes, well, I guess then we can drink wine and grab good company with our friends and good conversation and love our wives enjoy the good life. And Cineas leans forward and says, my king, we can do that right now. We don't have to conquer it. And that is the whole thing. And it's the whole thing for all of us. And the thing is, that story tells us that this shit that I think is so unique to me is such a boring common problem that people were writing about it 3rd century BC, right?
Mhm.
And so I have this hungry ego, and I've discovered that, you know what, man, you don't quiet an ego by feeding it. You quiet an ego by starting. How do you start? You disappear. I always say this: happy people disappear. Empires are born of discontent. Show me a famous person, and I'll show you someone who's miserable. And how do you make an ego disappear? And we do this in Buddhism with the Bodhisattva vow, which is that you vow to save all sentient beings, right? You vow to go out there and be of service to others. How can I help? And we have this meta practice, this loving kindness meditation, where we sit, and instead of focusing on our breath, as I described, picture people, first ones that you love, then ones you're neutral, then ones that you hate. And you push that out, that feeling out to them. May you be happy. May you be at peace. And you really feel it. And then you realize when you're feeling it for them, you are feeling it for yourself. And in the fire service, what do we do, Arjuna, right? We put on a mask which erases us. We do not sign our names. The only thing anyone knows about me is my name. And yeah, people may call us heroes, but they don't know who the hell I am, right? And then what do? We go into death. And we do it wearing gear that we know is going to give us cancer. We go in. My shit's PFAS contaminated. How much you clean that hood? I have hydrogen cyanide rubbing on my neck all the time, man. You know that. And I don't know who I'm seeing. I don't know who they are. They could be serial killers. They could be, I don't know, political enemies. They could be anyone. It doesn't matter. And that act of service, that act of I disappear, it doesn't matter. You know, I could die in here. And the only thing that anyone is ever going to know is a firefighter, right? A firefighter perished ran out of air, got lost on a search, you know? And yeah, maybe in the LODD report, they'll know my name, but maybe in the training center, they'll remember my name, but you know what? They're not going to remember it for long. Hundreds of us down every year. So, and look, I mean, maybe if I died coming out of the window after making the grab, look, how do we die, right? How do we die in the job? How do we die in a car accident? That's how we die. If I die in an air emergency or fall through a floor or something really boring like that, where I didn't do anything special, which is how it happens a lot, I'm going to get forgotten. And that act of finally letting go of that ego of saying, I don't matter. I really don't. And in that moment, you merge with everyone else and you realize what we call anatta, that there is no separation, that interdependence, that it is really a realistic thing to say that I am you, that I can't exist without. And that sense of community and intimacy and love, it is the only thing worth living for. And look, people come to it in many different ways. I think Buddhist firefighters is pretty rare. But for me, that is the ultimate expression of the fire service. And it lets me look around. Look, man, there is no bigger, backstabbing, gossipy, bitchy little group than a firehouse. You know that. We're a brotherhood. So brotherhood, we beat the shit. We were awful to each other. You know how firefighters are. God, we're terrible. And I just look at them, and I cannot describe you the love.
Beautiful. I am just blown away of how much this has changed your life. It screams through the Zoom session right now how much has changed your life. And maybe somebody who's listening right now is contemplating what to do in the rest of their life and how to struggle with their own ego, how to struggle with, material things and what's really important in life. And So hopefully some of your messages, well, a little nugget here or there kind of resonates with somebody listening right now.
Hopefully they volunteer to be firefighters. We need help. We
That that
need people.
that too.
But look, I want to be clear too, also, Arjuna. I'm talking about these transcendent, beautiful, wonderful moments. And I think there's a wonderful thing that my brother told me, which I think is from AA, which is you don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. You're listening to me rhapsodize about how wonderful all this shit is. And all of that is true. But I'm still living a life, right? Yes. I'm still an asshole. And I have a lot of work to do. And like, I'm so excited to get married. And it's going to be hard. And I love being a firefighter. And that's going to be hard. I'm not always going to get along with the people in my service. And my path in Buddhism is going to be hard. Like all of this, it all involves the regular messiness of life. And I don't want anyone to think that your path to mental health and self-actualization and all the things that you're trying to do at Silver Arrow for people. And, what I also want to help bring to people as a chaplain, that is the messiness. That is the suck, the boredom, the disappointment, the trouble you're going to get into, the failure, like all of that. None of that goes away. And I really want to make sure that comes home for everyone, because I'm sounding like I'm walking on clouds out here,
Well, just like the psychedelics, just like Buddhism or any other religion or any other practice or any other training, each individual person has what they need, right? So it might work for you. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everyone. But I think that's the beauty of podcasts and books and videos, that we can pass along this knowledge to other people that maybe aren't aware that that's out there, that's attainable, that's something that might actually fit their life.
Yeah.
So there might be one person today who kind of looks into this a little deeper, right? So, and there might be other people that say, no, I'm happy where I am. So
It's true, that guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Look, I'm
Yeah.
sure a lot of firefighters, look, man, I'm a Buddhist. I'm an intellectual. I'm a writer. Most firefighters look at me like, who the hell are you doing?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So as a historian, which is another big part of your life, I know in the fire service, we talk about stoicism all the time. And I'd love to get your view on how you define stoicism, and if you see any correlations to the fire service, good or bad.
Sure. So I think Stoicism is very misunderstood. I want to be careful. One thing every good historian does is they admit the limits of their expertise. I'm a military historian. I am not. And in fact, we say in history that expertise is that you know more and more about less and less. So I know a lot about very specific topics in military history. But what I do want to bring out, from what I do understand of Stoicism, is its similarity to Buddhism. A lot of people think that Stoicism is privation, the ability to resist, a stoic person. Something terrible has happened and I'm just not going to show any emotion. And I really think that's a profound misunderstanding of what Stoicism is. Stoicism is acceptance, and Stoicism is presence. I often say that, one of the most common things is that come to a door, the door is locked. Stop trying to open it. Problem solved. That's Stoicism.
And out of the fire ground.
Right. Most people who think that they're Stoics, they would be horrified by that. A wonderful way of looking at, and it's so misunderstood because Marcus Aurelius he's a Roman emperor whose meditation is form the basis of what most people consider. He has this wonderful saying, which people use a lot, which is that that which becomes an impediment to action is action. That which stands in the way is the way. And so many people tough guy that, that means this fire that bursts me, I must stick my hand into it. No, it's what I described before. Daido Roshi talked about being the barrier. So I'll give you an example. I had an opportunity to do Dokusan, which is a personal face-to-face interview with this abbot at a Zen monastery. And I disagree with him on a lot of political stuff. And I'm trying to think of what I would want, because you go and you get one question. And what I wanted to say to him was, um, I'm not going to change your mind, but this disagreement, I'm pleading to it, and I'm circling it and circling it. It's creating separation where there should be intimacy. What is the Buddhist path to just being with that and being okay with it? Because that's the kind of world I want to live in, where when someone thinks I'm an idiot, they're like, "Oh, Mike, you're an idiot. Let's get a beer," like that kind of thing. And I was so scared of what he might say to me, or that I might offend him or whatever. And I just didn't go. I missed that opportunity. That was the barrier, that fear of intimacy, that if I'm intimate with this person, that they'll either reject me or that they'll show me something about myself that I cannot. And that's what Marcus Aurelius was talking about. That's the obstacle. That's the barrier I would have to be. That's what stood in the way. And for that to be the way, I would have to hold it tenderly. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be worried about that rejection. And that thing that you think is soft is what makes you wonderful and lovable and worthy to be a part of this community. And then with that fear and that vulnerability to walk into there, sit down with that and say, "Hey, I'm worried about this." And can you see the difference between that and sticking your hand in a fire?
Well, to me, it's the epitome of being brave. Being brave to me is being stoic, and stoic, just like you said, is expressing your emotions, expressing how you're feeling, expressing who you truly are. That's how I kind of, if I could put it in a real simple term, it's being brave with yourself and being brave with others. In my own thoughts, right? So just to put it real simple, yeah, I think stoicism is one of those things that often, like you said, it's looked at being as that stoic, just a statue, essentially, just like Marcus, right? So
Well, but I mean, I think you put it so well as being brave. I love that you said it that way, because the first thing I'm going to think when I know someone is hurting and they're not going to go near it, my first question is, what are you afraid of? Grappling with that pain, and I think that in the most tender way, like, man, are you scared? And that's the thing that when I'm trying to help people, I got a breakthrough, right? Like excuse me, breakthrough is the wrong way. I have to help them to get to a place where they can understand that when you confront that, yeah, it's going to hurt it's going to hurt, but you're going to be okay.
yeah,
And part of how you're going to be okay is I'm going to be right there.
beautiful. So, what would be one question that I have not asked you that you wish I asked you about your life, your
Oh,
journey, your lessons?
oh man. That's a good question. I would ask, uh, what about traditional therapy and what about traditional medication?
Hmm.
You haven't talked about that, right? Most people, when they finally admit, which a lot of firefighters don't, they have a mental health challenge, that's what they're going to wind up getting into. And I want to say that both of those things can be and are effective and can be and have been effective for me, both talk therapy and traditional medications. I will say that um, I still think talk therapy is incredibly effective. However, so much of my Buddhist practice is sort of the same thing, where you're confronting who you are and discussing it and moving through it. And so that's not really a big part of my life anymore. Although I was in therapy 2 years ago. It was very recent. So I highly recommend it. Traditional medications, and by this I mean things like Wellbutrin, ibuprofen, SSRIs, and those kinds of things that are more likely to be prescribed by a doctor. And again, I'm speaking only for myself. It can be effective. In my experience, they are a very limited effectiveness. And I had frequent medication breakthroughs. The side effects, which included, I'm very lucky in that I was still able to have sex, but it really dampened that experience. It dampened libido. And I certainly thought, well, that's okay. I can live without that. You can't, or I can't. It really is a kind of living death to have that part of you switched off. And I felt it. And so I found that those medications limiting. And that also contributes to my frustration, because here we have psychedelics, which are medications, and there's plenty of peer reviewed science out there that shows that there's something crazy like 60% effect, 70% effect for the kinds of things I was am grappling with. And traditional medications are 20 to 30. And yet traditional medications, no problem. And you don't have to prescribe it free, but psychedelics, you go to jail. So I'm really hoping that will flip. But I want to make sure that those options that you haven't discussed are at least mentioned, because they're likely to be the first ones that your listeners will encounter. And you may have a different experience than I did. And any tool, because that's what really we're talking about here, right? Is that we want to have the richest. Look, we go around once, Arjuna, right? I'm 50, man. I got another 30 years up right if I'm lucky. That's not a lot of time.
No, you
And I want that to be the most rich and powerful, not always pleasant. I don't want to always be pleasant. I want it to be the most rich and fully lived, alive experience I can have. And all of these things we've discussed, spirituality, psychedelics, serving in the fire service, traditional medications, mental health therapy, and talk therapy, they're just tools to achieve that end. And I want to make sure that there's probably so many more I've missed, but I want to make sure that those are mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the beauty of, once again, podcasts and books. It's all about tools. And my therapist once told me, I'm going to put a whole bunch of things on this table here, like visualizing a table with items on it. You take what you want at the end of the day. You take what you want, leave what doesn't resonate with you, take what you want. Right. So that's how I kind of, every time somebody says something about tools, I'm like, okay, does it work in my life? Yeah. Okay, I'll use that. If it doesn't, I leave it on the table. Right.
Well, actually, it's a great way to bring it back to fire service, is that, like, I would always say, how do you force a door? And the answer is any way you can. Can you kick it? Did you try that door handle? A lot, okay, well, is the gap good? You're going to lose time on the irons with the rabbit tool work here? Can you kick the damn thing open? What's it made of? Like, we have all of these things that we study. There's all of these techniques, like, God, we spend so much time on the irons. I can't remember the last time I opened a door with irons, most of the time, it's open, or it's this cheap, flimsy plywood door or whatever, and you kick it open,
Yeah, totally.
But the point is, like, you have all of these formal things that you learn, and in the end is you get it done any way you can.
Yep, totally. So in our final minutes here, what would be one message that you want our listeners to really resonate and really connect with you today on? What would be one final message to the listeners of BTH?
You're okay. And I mean that not in the live, laugh, love. You're a wonderful, special. I don't mean any of it. You're a monster like I am. But my point is that greed and that hatred and whatever it is, the criminal impulse, the need for sense pleasure, you fudged your timesheet, you shop, whatever it is, that unites you with every other living being. I don't care if it's Mother Teresa. We are all the same in that. And that the solution to that, those things that you cannot stand about yourself, is not to push them away and pretend they're not there and look away from them. It is to lean into them and to hold them tenderly and to say, this is me too. And not to act right. Even you'll fail sometimes. We're going to work to be good people, right? At all times. But that rejection, I could not possibly be that guy who went to Iraq and did those things. That only makes that thing bigger. And that the solution to it is to square up to it and hold it gently. And that is the bravery that you, Arjuna, just described.
When you're holding it gently, are you judging yourself, or is this a non-judgmental hold?
Well, it's interesting. Everything in Buddhism is non-judgmental. In fact, Buddha describes very much that we try to let go of ideas of right and wrong. And in fact, clinging to right and wrong is a special kind of clinging, which is one of the second noble truth. It's the thing that causes suffering. Clinging, thirst, tanha is this. It means both pushing away what you don't want and wanting what you do want. Both of those things are the same, and that's what keeps us in dukkha. We call suffering really unsatisfactoriness. But I think that we are judgmental, and I think that that's a bridge too far for a lot of us. And I can look back at what I did in Iraq. I can look back at looking at those flare camps, knowing that there were people having the ability to stand up and say, I'm not going to do this. And I did it, Arjuna. And I did it because I wanted people to love me and think I was a hero. And I knew it was wrong in my bones, and I did it anyway. And I can hate that person, and angry at that person, and judge that person. Yes, I can. But I just have to also hold that person. Look, there is a reason that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden do and did the things they do and did. There are reasons. And I may not get those reasons or reject those reasons or whatever, but they're their reasons. All have our reasons. And we gain nothing by pretending that those reasons are.
Might have to listen to this episode a couple times.
Me too.
Awesome. So how can people get more information about Myke Cole? How can they connect with you?
Yeah.
How
So
can they
look,
learn more about you.
Yeah, I want to be very clear here. I'm a writer and I do some TV stuff. I am not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a chaplain yet. I'm a student, and I may wash out and I may not make it. It's not easy. So, look, if people reach out to me with spiritual or mental health questions, I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll connect you to resources. But I'm a writer, and if you go to my website, it's mykecole.com, mykecole.com. There'll be an email address on there. You can reach out to me, answer every email I receive. I'll certainly do my best. You can find my books on there. You'll find articles online. There's an article I'm very proud of on Slate Magazine about the crisis I see facing the volunteer fire service, and a radio show I did on that, which I think might be very much of interest. Although a lot of your listeners may not agree with it, but I'd be interested to get that feedback. But I will say this: if you're listening to this and there's something in my path that's resonated for you, not psychedelics, I'm sorry. Like, I can't take the legal risk of trying to connect you there. You go to Maps will help you. But I certainly talked about experience on them, if that will help you. But what I can do with Buddhism, I'm not a spiritual teacher, but I can point you to them. I'm not with therapy. Like I'm certainly not an expert in that, but I know some good therapists, those kinds of things. I can point you to books. I can point you to podcasts, and I'd be glad to do those things. But really I do use social media. But I'm not kidding. I think it is at the center of everything that is wrong with us. And I try to stay off it as much as possible. So if you want to find me, go to mykecole.com, mykecole.com, and my email's there.
Yeah, I've gone through your website a few times, and the vast amount of books that you've written over the time is pretty impressive. So,
well, I don't have kids. When you don't have kids, I tell people there's precious little that is good about not having children, but I do have time.
Yes. Final parting words, Myke?
I mean, Arjuna, I was so struck by your name, and I went running to Sarah after we talked because I thought it was your last name, which of course everybody does, right? And then we went to the help me out here, Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
But we say that Buddhism is Hinduism with the serial numbers filed off, and Ram Dass was a Hindu. And there's so much, of course, that I feel connected to and love with in the Hindu tradition. So there was something that really felt divine in that when you explained it to me. And what was also divine was having that experience that I would have dismissed just a few years ago. Mike's a bunch of shit, and being open to it and being able to be lifted by it. What a marvelous gift. And we always close all these sessions in my chaplaincy training with a wish for each other. And I guess my wish for your readers is that awe and that wonder and that sense of like, I don't know what is going on, there is shit happening that I do not understand, but it is pretty fucking awesome, even when it hurts. And I am really, really lucky to be showing up for it, to be present for it. And I wish for your listeners that they feel that way too.
Love it.
Cool.
Well, Myke, it's been an honor to meet you. Thank you for everything you've done in your own kind of close-knit world, but also extending that to sharing it into our community and passing along some knowledge, some wisdom from yourself, from your own journey. Like you said, you're not here as a teacher, you're here to share your story and what's worked well for you. So I appreciate you being kind of very open and honest and vulnerable. I think that's a true trait of, first spotters, but also humans.
Well, Arjuna, I'm so grateful that you invited me. This is the first firefighting podcast I've ever done. I have my first chaplaincy piece coming out any day now in a fire magazine. And look, you don't need me to tell you. Look, most firefighters are not interested in what I have to say. So I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to reach your audience and to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. And like I said, this might not fit for everyone. And if this doesn't fit for you, that's so be it. It's not the end of the world, right? But if this does fit with you and you're listening to this right now, there you go. Here's Myke.
Glad I could help.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.